Hello, podcast listeners, and hello to our special guest today. Ann Richardson from London, England, is joining us today. I am
Yes.
so excited to have you on the show. Ann and I we were on Substack together. She revealed herself as an author and has had quite an illustrious career. And I wanted to talk to you because in the Pebble in Your Shoe podcast, we talk to people in their third chapter, and you, dear Anne, are doing some very interesting things. So I'd like to just get to know you a little better so our listeners know where you're living and how you came to live in London since you are from America originally.
Okay, that's very simple. In my third year of college, I decided I wanted to get away and did a junior year abroad, which is not an uncommon thing for people to do. I went to London instead of, everyone went to Paris in those days. I don't know what they do now, but everyone used to go to Paris. But I thought it was hard enough to study political philosophy, which is what I was doing in English, never mind in French. So I went to the London School of Economics, and in more or less my first or second year, second week there, not year, week there, I met a man who has become my husband. And we were an item, if you want, over that year. And he eventually went back to America and did a PhD there, but he eventually wanted to come back to England. We got married in the middle of all that, and we've been married ever since. So that makes us married 60 years, about which I wrote a
60 years. Okay.
post. Yes, six oh.
Wow.
It's
So
kind of funny, but you just keep going. I mean, I say to get old, you just keep breathing and you just keep breathing. You
just
married, if
going.
you're happy, it just keeps going. And it's
Yeah.
very happy.
So he got his PhD in the
In
US
America, yes. It was
and
very
then
nice in those days.
and
And
then
then he got a job. He actually was invited to come back and have a job at the London School of Economics, which is where he had studied and where we had met. So that was a very nice offer. It's a very good place to be. We wanted to be in London, but just as in America, when you're an academic, you don't always end up in the place you want because you have to go to the university that chooses you. So it was fine. He came back to London. I came with him to London, and we've been here ever since. In fact, we've only lived in 3 places in that time, and most of it in the house we're in now. We've been here since mid-70s. So everything's quite been straightforward. We had 2 children along the line, and now I have 2 grandchildren.
wonderful. How did moving to England impact your career? What was your career?
I was sort of not sure what I was going to do, and it became fairly early on that we were going to move. So I didn't ever feel I had a very stable career in America. I worked for a voluntary organization in New York, and it's not worth going into much detail about it. I had originally wanted to be a civil servant. My parents were civil servants, and I sort of thought that looked like a good job, and I was good at organizing things. But actually, when I came to England, first of all, you had to be English to be an English civil servant. I'm not sure if you still do, but you certainly did then. And second of all, they had no arrangement for part-time. And I arrived here pregnant, which was the way we planned it. But I needed to work part-time, if at all. And it wasn't really in the time like now when everybody plans to go to work after they have kids. But my mother had worked all her life, and I just wasn't sure. But once I had my daughter after about 3 months, I said, this is nice. I like being a mother, but it's not enough. I want to work. So I started looking for work, but I couldn't get work in the civil service or in many places because they didn't want part-time workers, and I only wanted part-time work to manage with the baby. So I ended up getting into research work because researchers, anyone who wanted a researcher, they didn't care what time you did the work, when you did the work. As long as you got it done and you billed for your hours, it was fine. So it was a very happy arrangement for them and for me. And I worked for about 4 or 5 years for various different places as a researcher. And I always like to say people think you go into research for a great thirst for knowledge or deep understanding. I went into research because it was something you could do part-time with a baby. That's how I got into it, which I think is a good example of many decisions we make in life. We make them for some practical reason, and then it ends up being what you do. And I ended up doing research, and I ended up liking doing research and actually getting quite good at doing research. And I eventually became a senior researcher, and I was off. That's what I did. That was my career, to be a researcher, which is a rather vague term. I'd have to go into more detail to explain, but that's what I did.
Okay, well, let's just say, to give a frame of reference to the listener, how old are you?
I'm 82 as of
So
last
you're
week.
82. So when you were 20, 60 years ago,
Yeah,
or mid 20s after college, the world wasn't set up for working mothers. Would you?
absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And certainly not working mothers who only wanted to work some of the time to accommodate your family,
You're
correct?
right.
So you found an opportunity, and like a lot of mothers do, they try to make it work, and it may not have been your first choice, but it worked for you at that time. And a door opened and you stepped through, and then you became a researcher, right?
Right. I wrote to a lot of people and said, is there anything I could do for you? I'm looking for work. And somebody who was looking for someone who needed a part-time researcher said, yes, you could work for me. I met him, we got on well, and that's how it happened. I just think that's not uncommon for a lot of things we do. But I became good at it, and I liked it, and I'm glad I did it. As I'm glad I came to London, even though it wasn't my part of my life plan to go live in England. It's been very good for me. I like living in England.
Okay, so you did this job for a while. You had two children, correct?
Yes, but I had two children very bizarrely. I had one child when I was 26, and then got involved in research, my work, and I got involved in, then I decided to do a PhD, and time went on, and time went on, and eventually I had my second child when my first one was nearly 13.
Oh, so you have two only children.
Yes, I do. It's rather
Yes,
like that.
yes.
I have two only children. I mean, now they're both middle-aged almost, and they're sort of closer together. But when they're 2 and 15, it's a sort of weird combination.
So you started over. You started
Yeah,
over.
exactly.
And then
I did.
how did you accommodate a 2-year-old after you'd had all these years of a child who was becoming increasingly
It's great
independent, right?
difficulty, and they're very different. I mean, my first child had been very easy. She was very easy to look after. She was very sweet, very nice. She still is very nice. She's one of these people that wants to get on with people, and life was very simple. And I thought, this is lovely. I'll have another one. And the second one was completely different. He's a boy. He was very demanding, very assertive. He wanted things. He was very complained about everything. He still does complain about everything. And so life was very difficult. And I will say the hardest part was about when she was 15 and he was 2. We had the terrible 2s and the terrible 15s all at once. And around that time, I was finishing a book, and it was horrible. I just didn't know whether I was coming or going. It was really very difficult. I mean, we all know as working mothers, it can get difficult, and that was probably the worst. Eventually, she left home and we just had him, and then life became a little easier. But it's hard. You just do it. You've made that decision. You've stepped through that door, and you've just got to keep going.
Yes, yes, yes. So you wrote a book between having two children and working. You were also working with the 2-year-old when you had the
I
baby.
was writing a number of books because I was doing research, and I did social research. Basically, that means I was asking people about how their health services were, or I did some research on patient support groups, and I wrote a book about that. I did all kinds of things, anything anyone asked me to do. Originally, I was interested in some sort of philosophical questions, like when people want to involve the public in decision making, or they want to involve consumers, in particular consumer decision making. I actually wrote my PhD thesis on that subject, and I wrote a book on the broader subject of it. All around the time that my son was born, it was all happening at the same time. And over time, I was asked by different organizations to do research on other subjects. I was asked to do something about working with cancer patients. How did they find the health service that they were getting? Or what does it feel like to be taking anticoagulants? I mean, I could name 10 different subjects that I did, one after another, because many of these projects are short, and almost everyone results in a report. So people say, when did you start writing? I was writing all the time, writing reports. And in some cases, I was writing research reports. Sometimes I was writing a book. Sometimes I was writing a chapter of something, or I even wrote a manual on how local authorities could support self-help groups, patient support groups, all kinds of different things depending on what I felt was needed. And I worked for a long time. I won't go through the whole detail because there's a lot of different organizations I worked for, but eventually I went freelance in my mid-40s. I actually had a row with the head of my research institute, who I didn't think understood what I did, and he didn't really ever like me terribly anyway. And I just had a row and said, I'm going to leave. And it was actually the best thing I ever did. And I feel like saying thank you to him because he made me so cross that I left. And it was wonderful because then when you're freelance, you're very scary because you don't know if you're ever going to have work again because someone has to ask you. But in fact, people did ask me. And when the phone rang, I never knew what it was going to be. It might be someone asking me to go to abroad, to France or other places where I did work for the World Health Organization. It might be someone asking me to go to Birmingham, which is a lot less glamorous, to write up a conference on something. So I did an awful lot of different things. I did research. I helped government departments write up their research. I even did a little research management. It was always in the fields of health and social care, but it was very varied. And that was wonderful. It was really fun. And I loved the thrill of never knowing when the phone rang what it was going to be, what they're going to ask me. So it was a very fun life, I think. And in the course of that, I wrote quite a lot of things. I was just looked, because of our interview, I looked on Amazon to see how many things it says I wrote, because I don't keep track of them. And I think I got to 12. Plus, there's a lot of translations of books I've written recently, but it was something like 12 books. But the ones that are you know about now are written for the general public. And most of the things that I wrote before were written either for academics as a sort of textbook, or for professionals like nurses who wanted to know how you do something, or government department that wanted to know what the answers you found from some focus groups were. But they weren't likely to be of interest to the general public. And then as I got older, I thought it would be fun to write for the general public, which I had done on one other occasion before. There is one other book that fits in with the set of books that you know about, but mostly they don't.
So when did you actually start writing for fun, for, just for your own pleasure and for the general public?
Well, it was, a lot of it was fun then. I mean, but I will say the first book that I wrote totally on my own bat was I had an extremely good friend, a young man. I was 50 and he was 30. He had AIDS and he was about to die of AIDS because in those days, I don't know how well you
What
remember
year?
those days.
What year was this around? Just
1990, late
1990.
80s and
Okay,
90s.
yes.
And he was a big cheese in the AIDS business. He ran an organization and he ran a conference for people with AIDS, a big international conference. And he had a lot of charisma. He really, when he was on the stage, he just attracted people like some people can. But he was rather lonely, and we became friends, and really good friends. And we went for lunch one day, and he said that he had asked everybody who was coming to this conference, an AIDS conference, of people with AIDS, this was nothing to do with professionals, all people with AIDS, to write something about their lives. And my jaw dropped up, and I said, what are you going to do with that? That'd be fascinating. And he said, I don't know. I was thinking of sending them to a publisher and getting them to publish it. I said, that's not how it works. You can't do that. I said, you need someone who'll put it together. But I could put it together. And in the course of that lunch, we invented this book that eventually became Wise Before Their Time, which is a book of interviews with people with AIDS who were then dying. I interviewed 20-something people, but we also had all the, sorry, I forgot to mention that then I went to the Department of Health and I got some money to get interviewers to come to the conference that he was organizing. So we interviewed in 5 days. It was a 5-day conference. We interviewed 20 people, but we also had all the contributions that had been offered for the conference that he had asked for. And I put that all together into a book. And that was wonderful fun, very interesting and very moving, and got me very interested in the whole issue of death and dying. He died before the book came out, which was very upsetting. I knew he was going to die, but it made me interested in how do you deal with someone who's going to die. Got me very interested in death altogether. And after he died, I then decided I'd like to go work for a hospice. I went to see a hospice by chance. Someone took me by chance. I was with another guy and he said, I have to drop in this hospice for a minute. So we dropped in and I just loved the place. It was just a feeling of tranquility. And I thought, what a wonderful place to be. And then I discovered you could actually volunteer in them. And so I decided I wanted to volunteer, and I went to volunteer in a hospice looking after dying people, which was very, very moving part of my life. I loved it. It's hard to say why, but I was sort of fascinated, but why do people who work in a hospice like working in a hospice? And that's what my book was about. I interviewed, I forget how many it was, 30 something like people in 2 hospices about how it felt to work in a hospice and why they did it. Because it's very strange to go every day to work with dying people. You know, you're not going to see them again. It's very weird. But they absolutely loved it, and they threw themselves into it, right down to the cook. They insisted I interview a cook who I said, no, I want to talk to the nurses. And they said, no, you want to talk to our cook. And eventually they wore me down, and I said, okay. And of course, it was one of the best interviews I ever did, because he was fascinating on how you get people who are dying to eat a little bit. He said, so that they're up enough to talk to their friends and say their goodbyes. And he was fascinated with the whole process. Anyway, my second book was called Life in a Hospice. So that's how I came to write that. I'm sort of answering questions you haven't asked me, but they.
Well, that's okay. I was going to ask you what was your next book. So then
That's how it happened.
You made my job very easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Life in Hospice and Wise Before Their Times. And what about
dying? One was about people dying, and one was about looking after people who are dying. So
yes. Well, I can see how those two came close together, and it seems like you follow your curiosity.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's exactly what I do.
And then the next book. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I left things for a long time, and I got itchy. I feel like writing another book. And actually, these books, which are rather like the research that I did, are all based on interviews. And there's a very particular process. You interview people, you transcribe, you record it, you transcribe it word for word. You have people called transcribers who are doubtless going out of business because of AI, but they were transcribers. And then I would take the transcriptions, which were huge. One interview could be 50 pages. So I had pages and pages of transcript and took bits out of that to make it into a readable book. And they are readable books, and they're quite successful books. But I loved that process. I did that beforehand with research that I did. And I loved the process of talking to people and getting their genuine words. I mean, talking to professionals who have all the jargon is boring as hell, but talking to ordinary people who put things in a very straightforward way, it was just fascinating. I loved it. The problem was that I'm not a good interviewer. Once you see what a really good interviewer is, you don't want to do it yourself. You want someone else to do it for you if you're a researcher, because you want to get the best material. They had to ask people, how does it feel to be whatever it is, and to push them a little bit. I would, if I'm an interviewer, I would say, oh, that's interesting, and want to move on, because I wouldn't have the courage to push them. And I mean, the interviewers know what they're doing. They talk about, I mean, I'm talking about really sensitive interviewers. And probably the most sensitive we did, just to go back 1 minute, is that I wrote a book with another woman, which was called Letting Go. And it was about parents of what we then called mentally handicapped children, but they were retarded. I don't know what word you use now, learning disabilities, learning intellectual disabilities. There's a lot of fancy words people use. Right. But people who had problems in their head, but not they were born or created to become handicapped in that way, disabled in that way. The parents often lived with them right into their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And the problem was what was going to happen to those children when they died. And it was the most of all the subjects I've done. You mentioned AIDS, you mentioned hospice, anything else I've done, cancer. That was the most moving research I ever did, because these parents often knew they had a problem, what was going to happen to their children after they died, but they hadn't confronted it properly. And often the husband and wife had never talked about it before, so that it was incredibly difficult interviews. I wouldn't have dreamed of being able to do that, but I had an interviewer who could do that, and I paid the interviewer, and then I used the material, and I planned the interview, and I talked to the interviewer when she'd come back from an interview. I remember the first one she did on that project. I said, how long does it take? She said, an hour and a half to do the interview and an hour and a half to sit with your arm around them afterwards, you know, because it's so moving and they're in tears and you have to talk about it. And we even set up a system for where they could get some help from social workers if they needed it. afterwards because we were opening up such a difficult wound of leaving a dependent behind. Anyway, that's a long story, but the point is that I needed a good interviewer, and people always said to me, "Oh, you could do it." Yes, I could do it, but I wouldn't get as good material. So that has always been a problem for me. But I wanted to do another. But I'm now into about 2014 or something like that. I wanted to do another book, and I wanted it to be about old people. And I thought, what would be a good subject? And I thought grandmothers. And that's how I wrote the book, Celebrating Grandmothers, which is a set of interviews with people who are grandmothers, women who are grandmothers, about what it's like. And I was very worried it would be a very boring book. Everyone would say, "Oh, they're wonderful, and oh my God, they're so wonderful, my grandchildren." And I forgot when I was doing this how completely awful families are. So there were plenty of grandmothers that said, "Oh, my grandchildren are so wonderful." But there were a lot of them that said, "I love my grandchildren, but my son won't let me see them, or my daughter-in-law won't let me see them, or we have very difficult relations, or they live far apart and they don't want me to come visit." I mean, there are a heck of a lot of problems. And furthermore, some grandmothers don't like the way their grandchildren are being brought up. So you've got all of that. So there's a lot of ways in which that added quite a bit of pebble in the shoe to the story of the grandmothers.
Did you conduct, now you did say there's a way to do an interview. Now, did you conduct the interviews with the
No, I
grandmothers?
got someone else to do those interviews.
You what?
And I got someone else to do
Oh, you
those
did?
interviews.
Okay.
The problem was then after that, all my interviews got too old. In fact, the two best interviewers, who were 10 years older than me, died. So I don't have them anymore. And another one moved away. So I don't have interviewers anymore. So I love doing that kind of research. I think it's wonderful to interview people and you get really deep material. And for instance, on the one on grandmothers, I anonymized them so they could say anything they wanted. They could say, "I can't stand my son,"
Were these journalists who were your interviewers, or I mean, is
No,
that
they were professional interviewers.
yes? Oh, okay. I
There
don't
are
think
such
I ever
things.
heard of that
Well, in a
before.
research organization, it needs people who
Oh,
know how to
I
interview.
see.
And
I
they
see.
had some
Yeah.
ones and they actually spent their time training other interviewers on how to do interviews.
Mhm.
There's a real trick to developing it early on, and how they called it go for the kill when you're really going to ask some difficult question, and then how you bring them up at the end so you never end
So
on a
it's
subject. There's a whole lot of stuff about it. But
perhaps
mainly you have to have the courage to ask questions that you wouldn't dream, that seem intrusive. And you have to get the confidence of the person that they don't mind answering those questions. So it's all very interesting. But I have,
psychological. Maybe
yeah,
there's a lot of psychology involved in asking the right questions, and asking them in such a way that
yeah,
you feel comfortable answering, right? They have to actually, well, now you got me thinking about it. That does seem like there's a bit of science behind how to,
a lot behind it. And
yes.
also, I watched in focus groups, one of them was very good at just keep asking the same question. And it's really interesting if you ask the same question, which seems incredibly rude. They asked people why they were doing work, why they were working with very disabled people, extremely disabled people. And you say, why? And they say, "Oh, because they need the help and it's really important for that to help them." And then she would just say, "Well, why do you work with these people?" And mentally, the person thinks, "Oh, my other answer wasn't good enough." So they go a bit deeper down and they say, "Well, uh, I find it meaningful," and they start talking about what it does for them. And it's much more, it's very interesting to see how I've actually watched her ask that question 3 times. And I think every time she got a different level of answer. I wouldn't have the guts. I just wouldn't. I know that I would freeze at the time and wouldn't dream of asking someone something 3 times. It's so rude. But
Oh
if
my
you have the right
gosh.
personality and the right body English, you can get away
Yes.
with it.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, it's
So
fascinating.
I'm going, I
We're
think you
moving.
should be nervous now. I might be using some of these psychological tactics on you in this interview today. So let's get to the book, The Granny Who Stands on Her Head. First of all, are you a yoga practitioner?
Yes.
Yes. How long have you been doing yoga? Because I'm a yoga teacher and I'm obsessed with yoga. So tell us about your yoga practice.
Well, people kept telling me I ought to do yoga for years and years and years. And I thought it sounded really dumb. I thought the standing in the same posture for a long time, I just thought that sounds like what the army makes you do. It didn't sound like my idea of fun. But finally, Actually, I had troubles with my neck and my back, and I went to an osteopath who worked on it, and it would go away after 2 or 3 weeks. And I said, why does this keep coming back? She said, well, really, you need to do something that will give you strength in your body, because you need that strength. She said, I suggest you do yoga. So finally I thought, okay, I'm going to go to yoga. A friend of mine had been pushing this particular yoga teacher. I went, and I just kept going, because I'm kind of a person who says, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it once. I do it, keep doing it. And then I discovered I really liked it. And I never needed to go back to the osteopath again, because I got strong. And I don't love it every moment of it. Some of the stuff we do is very painful. It's Iyengar yoga, which I think is thought to be one
Oh,
of the
right,
problems.
right. So you were doing Iyengar yoga. So that's very not I want to say regimented, but very disciplined
Yes,
practice.
very,
Yes, and very precise. And
yes.
I have gone to a few of those classes, and sometimes I have a headache after because they are so move your foot 1 inch over
Yes,
here.
I know. Everything's going to be aligned exactly so.
Yes, 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 yes. But
But I
so
love it, and I love standing on my head. And the first time I stood on my head, I just thought this is great. I had actually stood on my head as a child, which you're not even supposed to do, but I had just done it for fun. Um, but I just like the yoga, and it's made me very strong. And a couple of times in my older age, I have fallen slightly, and I've had almost no bruises. I
mhm,
once slipped on my front door when it was iced over and didn't realize it was iced, and I looked upside down.
mhm.
And I stood there thinking, oh my God. And then I thought, actually, I don't hurt many places. And I had just a few bruises on my bum, and otherwise I was fine. And
Because
so I
those
think it
muscles
does.
are stretched. They've been worked with and they're malleable.
Yeah,
And let's not make it into a commercial for yoga, but I mean yoga for aging bodies is
I do
great.
think so.
Yes,
And my
yes,
yoga
especially
teacher's
for
1 year
balance.
younger than me.
Who
I mean,
is?
we do. My yoga teacher's 1 year younger than me. I mean, we're all old. I did a whole, I mean, it said the granny who stands on her head, but all the people in my class was said, so what? Oh, well, I'm a granny and I stand on my head. And so what? We were all grannies. But it's just a nice title. I mean,
It
it
is a
doesn't
nice
have
title. I was going to ask you, why did you title it? Because really, that section of the book is just one little chapter about
exactly.
doing it, but you just like the title for it.
Well, I figured it's catchy and people don't forget it
Catch.
easily. You don't forget it.
So
And
the book has a lot of excerpts from what I would think as the reader, and you can tell me if this was or was not your intent, but little snippets of your life that you felt were significant, even though they were, maybe a conversation in a coffee shop with a stranger, things like that, but they impacted you. Is that correct? Is that what you would say the book is about?
I think the book, to be honest, is made from a set of blogs. I had written a lot of blogs and I wanted to write a book, put them together in a book. And it took me a long time, but I finally figured out what the point of the book was. And once I figured out the point of the book, it really is the point of the book, although it took me a while to figure it out, is that I like being old. I like being old. And that's unusual. But I mean, people tell me it's unusual, but I realize I like it more than I like being young.
Oh,
And
I love to hear that. No one says that.
well, I say it loud and clear, and that's what the
Yes.
book is about. It's how I advertise the book. It's how the first sentence of the book says, somewhere in the middle of my 70s, I realized I like being old. And it's all about, so the book is about being old. And it's partly about saying that when you're old, you can do many of the same things you did when you were young. I like to sing. I still sing. It doesn't stop. A lot of things just don't stop. I like eating out. I like traveling. I can still do all those things. So there's not a problem there. And on the other end of the scale, there are some things you did as when you were young that you hated, or life happens to you, and you still hate them. If my computer's down, I'm still hate it. Your printer's broken, you still hate it. That doesn't go away. So you have a lot of things that are exactly the same as when you're younger. So then I wanted to make that point, is that life doesn't suddenly become completely different when you're old. A lot of what you do, you still do. In fact, I threw in, and I'll mention quickly, is sex continues. You don't have to stop having sex. I used to think you did, but you don't. Just keep going, enjoy it. But then I wanted to talk about the things that were worse about being old. And there are things that are old. You get wrinkled, you get lack of energy, you get tired, you forget things. I wrote a funny piece about forgetting things, if I remember correctly. So there are a lot of things that are not nice about being old that are new.
Mhm.
But the end of the book, how far you've gotten, the end of the book is about all the nice things about being old that are new.
Oh, I
So
didn't get to that part.
I
Okay.
didn't get to that part. Well, see, the point is that there's the same things that continue, and then there's the bad parts of being old and the good parts of being old, and I ended on that. And the good parts of being old are huge. Confidence, so much more confidence than you ever have as a young person in every respect. And I think that continues. I'm 82, I probably have more confidence than I did at 72, certainly than 62 or 52, and God knows at 32. You know, it's just so much better. And having confidence is such an important part of our day-to-day lives. Everything you do, the way you deal with people, the way you decide, make decisions, all of that changes as you get older. You just begin to think, someone said to me the other day, you just don't care anymore. And it's true, you don't care. I don't care if someone thinks I don't look right or didn't wear the right dress. What does it matter? It's not important. You know, so that confidence is just hugely important. And I think related to that is you feel more comfortable in your own skin. You know, I don't worry whether I'm pretty or not pretty, or I'm okay. You know, it doesn't matter to me. And how I present, and people, when you're young, you worry how you're presenting to people, how you look. Is my bum too big in this and all that stuff? It's all gone, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe for other people it's not, but for an awful lot of people I know, you just don't care anymore. You can, if you want to wear fat, flabby dresses, you do. I tend not to. I tend to wear trousers, and a hell of a lot of the time I'm in blue jeans and t-shirts and shorts. And my own granny would be shocked to think I walked around in shorts at the age of 80, but you know, who cares? That's the point. It's just a wonderful freedom that is like nothing else. Third of all, you've got grandchildren. Do you have grandchildren?
Yes, I do. I have two and another one on the way.
That is absolutely the most wonderful relationship in the whole wide world, is the grandchildren grandparent relationship. At least I hope it is for you. It certainly is for me and for a hell of a lot of other people. Your own children, of course, you adore them, but by God, they're hard work, and you feel responsible for them, and you worry about them. And did you do the
Yes.
right thing, or did you do the wrong thing? And if they do this, will that be bad for them? It's a constant worry all your life. Grandchildren, you don't worry about any of that. First of all, you know that kids turn out how they do, and it doesn't matter so much. So you just, but second of all, you don't have to do all that for them. You know, I do actually. I have one grandchild who I talk to quite a lot, rather intimately, because he has a lot of problems and he unburdens himself to me, feels very comfortable with me. But I don't basically feel responsible. And so it's just a happy relationship, a very loving relationship, close, cuddly, all the physical cuddliness, but none of the worry and the anxiety of what's going to happen and how are they going to be and what am I doing wrong. And you can spoil them if you like. As I say, you can give them ice cream twice at dinner if you want, or ice cream at breakfast. It really doesn't matter. You can just have fun. I hope you do that, all these things. I mean, it's just, I try to stick with what my children want me to do. You know, I don't want to go against what they want, but I mean, for instance, I have one of my grandsons, but they're from two different children. Both of my children have one son, so they're not brothers and sisters. My daughter knows that when her son comes to my house, he eats an entire punnet of ice cream, which he never gets at home at all. But she knows it, and I know it, and it doesn't matter. And he loves it because he gets his ice cream. It's just a very happy relationship, and it brings a lot
It
of
is
joy.
without the responsibility, as you said, and the worry of, am I doing this right? You know, and to be able to just enjoy them, you know,
Yes,
which I think when you're a parent, you have so many other responsibilities.
exactly. You
You
don't do
can't
all
devote
right.
all the time to enjoyment of your child, even though that's definitely like an important part of the parent-child relationship. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Now let's go back a little to your book and look forward to reading the end of your book. But
You
I
good.
do, there is one part that kind of stuck with me, and it reminded me of yoga because uh, well, I guess yogis say that we come in the world with an inhale and we end on the exhale. And you had written a sentence in there about how we die in the middle of a sentence. Is that what you
I
said?
like that. It wasn't my phrase. I picked it up from somebody else, but I like that. Said you die in the middle of a sentence. It just means we don't actually, you don't want to plan to the minute for when you're going to die. I think I said you sort of
Yes.
as if had your lunch, washed the dishes, put everything out in the cupboard, sat down in the rocking chair and waited for the Grim Reaper to arrive.
Right,
It
right.
doesn't work like that because you'd get very bored waiting for the Grim Reaper to arrive. So then you start doing
You don't
something.
know. Yes. Yes. You just have to
So
keep going, as you've said multiple times. You
going.
just keep going.
When I had my friend with AIDS, that was the first time I really thought about death. And I thought, how do you deal with someone with AIDS? I was so struck with someone dying. How do you deal with that? And I wanted to deal with it right. And I thought a lot about it because I'm a reflective person. And I thought, well, you don't want to treat them with kid gloves because they don't want that. They want to be treated with respect. And anyway, I worked my way through a lot of stuff. And I came to the point that you say you want to treat them just the way you would normally. That's what you come out with. And you work through all the different permutations you can go through. You just want to treat people who are dying normally. And you want to treat all people normally. I mean, nicely. You don't want to be nasty to them, but you just want to be normal with them to just, and life just goes on until it stops.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way it should be. And I think one of the things you were asking me is, why do I want to not stop writing and put my feet up or something? And the answer is because it's nice to keep writing. That's what gives me joy. All the things that I write about in that book, and I have others, give me joy. So why would I
want to
want
ask you, so that will come to the next subject, but before, let's just say one more thing in the granny who stands on her head.
Yep, sure.
Your son made up a word for you for the computer when it doesn't work, because you said how unhappy you are when your computer acts up, and I was sharing with you that my printer's not working, and my husband said he would throw it out the window. And now, what's the word? Do you remember? It was Rechenschmerz or something like that.
Goodness, I forgot. Rechenschmerz.
Yes, Rechenschmerz.
Yes, my son came up with that. He's very good with words.
Yes, yes, I love that because Schmerz means like a heartache, and he's
Yeah.
like
And
recognize.
Reckon means
I thought it meant math, like calculations and whatever, but it probably is.
that. He came up with it. I've forgotten the word myself, but
That was cute. That was a cute word, because I think we all suffer from when our technology does not cooperate. And certainly when I'm learning how to do podcasting on my phone, and I do the whole thing on my phone, and I'm like, why can't I do it on my screen? I have to do the phone. And it's just like a new world that I have to bend and yield to technology. And that's good because that keeps us pliable and our minds sharp. And so as I said at the beginning of the episode, I met you through Substack, and you did mention that you are a blogger, or you were a blogger, and I assume that your Substack newsletter is your form of blogging, or you have?
It is now. I did start blogging. It all started because this is again another example of how you get into things. I wanted to advertise my book celebrating grandmothers, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. And it was around the time social media was getting very popular. And I looked at Facebook, and there was an organization called 60 and Me. And I asked whether I could write a blog about grandmothers for 60 and Me. And they said, no, you can't write one, but you could write 12. So I thought, this is fantastic. Very good advertising for my book. And I will write blogs about being a granny. So I've written a lot about being a granny, which is one reason I've done a lot of thinking about being a granny. And after I finished the 12 after a year, I said, can I keep going and write on anything I want? And they said, yes, of course you can. So I actually began writing on anything. So I have been blogging for years. That started in, I think, 2014 or 15 or something like that. And but what I discovered is it didn't sell many books, so I didn't achieve my original purpose, but I loved blogging. I loved the length of it. I loved the feeling of it, and I was good at it. So I just discovered I loved that. And then someone told me about Substack, and I thought, right, I'll go on to it. I started in November 22. So it's been just a year and a bit I've been doing it. I couldn't think of a title, so I thought I'll call it The Granny Who Stands on Her Head, because I was a little bit lazy. And anyway, it's kind of a memorable title, and it allows me to write anything I want, and I do write anything I want. I don't know how much of my blog, my Substack you've looked at, but I write on anything in the world.
Yeah, well, I thought it was Fortnite. What is that?
Fortnite. Yes, that's because I decided that people would like to read what I wrote, but they might want to put it to one side. And if they put it to one side before, when a week was out, they wouldn't have read it yet. So I thought fortnightly, people won't feel I'm writing too much. I actually have a view that you can write too much, and I don't like people that write too much. And when they do, I tend to unsubscribe from them because
Right, me
either
too.
if it's too long, if it goes on for hours, you don't need it. Who needs to read me that long? I mean, the size of
Well, I mean, if it's interesting, yes, I'll read it. But
where
yeah,
rarely is it that interesting that they are saying something that they're going on for that long. So it's right reading a newspaper column. I wouldn't want that to go on for too long. And I also don't want it too frequent. So I just decided to call it Thought for the Fortnight. Comes because in England we have a thing called Thought for the Day on Sirius Radio, and every day somebody gives a serious thought for the day. And it's usually vaguely religious or something. I don't mostly listen to it, so I couldn't absolutely tell you. But I thought I'll call it Thought for the Fortnight, kind of as a nod to the BBC. And that's what it is. It's a thought for the fortnight, and it covers anything from death, sex, paintings, all kinds of things, ideas that I have, thinking about occasional little stories that have happened to me.
do you think you might make another book out of your
I
posts?
might, I
Yeah.
might, I have to figure out a theme because I think a book of blogs is really dull. So you have to figure out a way of having a theme. And that did work with the Granny Stones on Her Head because that really does have a definite theme. And I have to put some thought into it. But I mean, there's a lot of new stuff there. So, I mean, people that don't read my blog would like to read it. And anyway, people who start reading my Substack newsletter, they rarely go back and look at your archive. I mean, I don't think many people go back and look at your old ones. It's just too much.
Probably not, yeah.
It's too
I mean,
much work.
unless you put a link in there and say, "Oh, I wrote about this here," maybe they will. But so many few people really click links. Sometimes it depends on what the link is. Like I noticed if I put a song in there, there's a lot of people who click on the song. Yes, but
How long have you been going for?
well, it's been about 2 years that I started on I started a website for teaching yoga, and I did a newsletter there, and then I found out about Substack, and my writing has sort of evolved from yoga topics to other topics, and mostly about aging and the pebbles in the shoe of aging and things like that. So anyway,
overlap of those things.
what's that?
There's probably quite a lot of overlap of the kind of things you write.
There is, and I do think that I do write from the perspective of yoga, which reminds me, I was going to say about your book. I noticed just from my experience blogging every week that there's a lot of overlap and themes that I seem to use that I think that I could, assemble some of them and make them into a book because, you do have a lot of what do you call it? You don't start with a blank slate every week. Is what I want to say.
Ideas come around, yeah.
Yes, I mean a lot of it comes through the writing. But let's keep talking about you. So, what is the most important thing you've learned, would you say, in the last 10 years?
I saw that you wanted to ask that question. And it's a little bit to me like asking what's my favorite color. I don't know. I've learned a lot, but I don't know.
We can throw the question away. I said you can throw questions away. But let's say, what is the most important thing you've learned in your life then? Is there one thing, or is it too many to list?
I mean, that's the problem. I don't have one thing. I don't, for instance, have a belief in God. So if you have a belief in God, then God suffuses everything you do. I don't have that. So I don't you can forget about that one. I believe in being good to people. I believe in trying to help people and not harm them. You'll see that my Substack is actually, I'm giving any money I make, which isn't a lot, to a charity. It's not going to me. I've always tried to organize my life so that I'm being good to people and not bad to them. But I don't always succeed, We're all human and make mistakes. But I think the things I've just learned throughout my life, that it's important to be good to people. But I think I knew that for a long time. I think it's important to follow your nose and find out what you like. I think it's important to understand that you don't know what you like until you try, and sometimes you try by accident. I never thought I'd like blogging, but I tried it because I wanted to advertise my book, and I discovered I was good at it. I discovered I like doing research because I was looking for something I could do with a baby. A lot of life is serendipitous. And I think people need to just have a go, let go a little bit, and just go and try something. And you might have thought you never liked line dancing, but you go and do it and discover it's the greatest thing. I don't know, whatever it is, I'm a great believer in trying things and ditching them if it doesn't work, but trying out different things. And my work life was really like that because I had people throwing things at me all the time that I didn't know how to do. But if I thought I could probably do it, I said yes. People asked me whether I could set up an arrangement for auditing for public health doctors. I didn't know what audit meant. I didn't really know what public health doctors did, but I went and got an interview with somebody and we decided I could do that. And I learned as I went, and it was fascinating and it was good fun as well. So I'm a great believer in doing things that make you a little bit uncomfortable. I think, your thing is called the pebble in the shoe. So I assume you like that too in some way, unless you just see that as a nuisance. But I think that
It's also the yoga theme, like being uncomfortable in a pose and staying there anyway. So
yeah,
being
well,
okay with discomfort is also important.
you're right. I mean, I often say to people, there's a hell of a lot of things I do in yoga that are much tougher than standing on my head. It's really not that hard to stand on your head. It's just that people think it's very impressive, but it's much easier than a heck of a lot of other things we do. But anyway, so there's a lot of different themes. Being loving. I mean, I've got a loving husband, which helps a great deal. We've a great relationship. Having fun. We laugh a lot. I was brought up by a father who loved having fun. And that, I think, infused my life, and it confuses that book to some extent. I often refer to, I just found when I was writing that book, I kept referring to things he said or things he did. And so I eventually dedicated it to him. But he was fun. And I think having fun is something we get too serious about life. I think we should have fun in a lot of things we do.
What advice?
I'm working towards answering your question, but I might have forgotten.
You're not finished. Okay, you still have more?
Carry on. Let's carry on and we'll see where we go. But I mean,
okay. I don't want to cut you off, but we are running out of time, and I wanted to ask you to give one piece of advice to someone facing their third chapter. What would you say to them to have a good rest of their lives? What would you say? What should they do?
Don't stop. Don't stop things that you love doing. Don't stop being curious. Don't stop trying new things. Don't stop finding new friends. If you don't have a husband, go out, look for someone new. In my opinion, just keep living in the life that you've always lived. I know that when I became maybe in my 50s or 60s, I might have thought, oh gosh, I'm getting old, but there was never a point. There's never a point that you say, this is it. I'm finishing. I'm now over the hill. And you're not over the hill. I don't feel remotely over the hill at 82. I feel full of energy and full of fun, and I do lots of things and take up new things. I've been taking up walking much more than I ever used to. But
So just keep going.
Keep going, exactly. Just keep and do what gives you pleasure. If singing gives you pleasure, keep doing it. If yoga gives you pleasure, keep doing it. You probably get worse at it. I'm worse at it in the sense that I can't do things that I used to be able to do. But it doesn't matter. I still enjoy doing it, and I still do it to the best of my ability. And just keep working at it. Keep at it, really.
Oh, what's your favorite yoga pose?
Standing on my head, for sure.
Oh, it is. It is. All right. What's your least favorite one then?
Oh God, I can't do what people normally call the lotus, and we call something else fancy. And I can't do that. I can't twist my legs that way, and it's very uncomfortable. There are a lot of things we do that are extremely uncomfortable, as you just pointed out.
Yes. So tell us what we can look forward to with you if we want to subscribe to your Substack or if we want to read your books. What is coming up for you in 2024 that we can look for?
I don't know.
I'm
waiting to find out what comes up. I don't know what my next but one Substack newsletter will be about. I've written the next one, which is about sort of the shock when paintings are suddenly valuable because they discover it's by Rembrandt and they thought it wasn't, that kind of thing. And I think, most people say, oh my God, that was really valuable. Why did they sell it? Or, all that. I think it's really interesting. Did the painting suddenly get better? Do you like it better? Did the Mona Lisa smile change if it wasn't done by forgot the name now.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's interesting. Our perception changed.
Yeah.
The painting's the same, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's my next Substack. But the next one may be on something completely different because they are all on different things. I do hope to put together a book like you. And my husband said at lunch today, he said, I bet there's going to be a ton of books coming out in a few years' time when people decide to put their Substacks together.
True. That's true.
We may be part of a trend. But no, I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm flying off to Turin next week to see an old friend, and that's very special because I haven't actually been out of the country much in the last few years because my husband hasn't been well and I've sort of been looking after him. But he's now well enough for me to go away for a few days, and maybe something will happen there that inspires me. You never know.
Well, at least a story or two.
Each step you take, you discover something you never thought about before, and that leads to something. Just let it.
So if people, you don't plan.
Really, I have no plan.
You have no plans.
My grandchildren.
That's okay with me.
Grandchildren will get older. We will get older. I hope we remain alive. You have to, at my age, you do realize that death is coming one of these days. I may be a widow tomorrow. You never know. I hope not, but
you don't know. How do you live with that uncertainty? Do you think the yoga helps you with thinking about things that it could change in an instant? And has for probably a lot of your friends, right?
I think experience does. I think just living life a long time, when you're 70, it's around the corner, but maybe not quite yet. When you're 80, it's getting a little closer. And you just know it can happen. But as I said with my friend who had AIDS, you don't want to live life differently. You want to live life to the full. And if it happens in the middle of a sentence, it happens in the middle of the sentence. But I've just done what I can to enjoy myself and I'd like to leave the world a little better than I found it, but I don't know that I have. I just done a bit of writing. I don't think I've not made major contributions, little things here and there.
Well, just being yourself is your contribution, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yes. So to wrap things up, how do people find out more about you? Where would you send them?
I have a website, www.annrichardson.co.uk. I think are you going to put that somewhere?
Yes, I will.
That's easy. My Substack is arichardson.substack.com. And that's also
every 2 weeks.
And it comes out every 2 weeks, and it's less than 1,000 words. It's short, and it's something you're not expecting. Whatever it is, you're not expecting it because it's something completely different.
I don't know, Ann. I think you're planning to do something unexpected. So I call BS on your fact that you don't plan. Anyway, thank you so much, Ann. We really appreciate you coming on and enlightening us with your, what did you say, 82 years here. You've taught us something new, and thanks so much, Ann.
It's been a great pleasure. It's great fun. Thank you.
Thank you.